Welcome to the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Today, I, Volodymyr Solovyan, senior analyst at the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, will host the conversation with our remarkable guest today, Carrie Hessler-Radelet, President and CEO of Global Communities Organization and former director of the Peace Corps. Thanks for visiting, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, and I'd like to emphasize at the beginning the fact that humanitarian missions in Ukraine is a very vital element of post-war reconstruction in terms of rebuilding Ukraine and post-war recovery. And today, independent non-governmental organizations and aid organizations provide Ukraine a great assistance and lays foundations for their economic recovery and building of society and political foundations of the post-war Ukraine. And also it is very important to provide assistance for Ukraine in terms of strengthening resilience of Ukrainian society, because it is background for the rear of Ukrainian army, the whole Ukrainian society.
Yes.
And your organization, Global Communities, deal with local communities, so it is very great assistance for Ukraine, and I hope that we will discuss a little bit these developments and your experience of visiting Ukraine and further developments. So I'd like to mention that your organization, Global Communities, deal with 35 countries. It is a very big deal, so it is a very great assistance for countries like Ukraine that deal with external threats and help them in terms of humanitarian assistance and sustainable development. So first, I'd like to ask you about your purpose of your current visit and whether it is your first visit of Ukraine.
Thank you, first of all, so much for inviting me here today. Of course, I have known about the Ukraine Crisis Media Center for many years, and such a privilege to visit you first time. This is my 6th visit to Ukraine, actually. My first visit was in 2007, and I came here in my previous career. I worked for a public health organization called John Snow Incorporated. It was supported by the U.S. government, by USAID, similar to our DOBRE work. And we worked on HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment here in Ukraine. So that was the first time I came. Later, I came twice as director of the Peace Corps. Ukraine was our biggest program in Peace Corps. We had over 500 volunteers. For a number of years, we had programs that size, and it was probably one of our best organized and most impactful programs. So I came here twice. The last time I came, actually, was only 2 weeks after Maidan. So that was different. That was a very different time, although in some ways there are similarities. And so I'm really delighted to be back here with Global Communities. This is my first visit as CEO of Global Communities, but we're very proud of the work that we do together, the Ukraine Crisis Media Center and Global Communities, in implementing the DOBRE project.
What is the main changes in Ukraine you have noticed since your last visit?
Well, you know, I have to say my first impression, I came in on the train, and I walked out of the train station, and the city looked so vibrant, so alive, so modern, so prosperous, really, are the words that came to my mind. In some ways, it's strange, because I know that Ukraine is under siege from the Russian aggressor. I know that there is war in this land. In Kyiv, though, it seems very peaceful, and life goes on as normal, but there are still, you know, I hear the alarms, the air alert, you know, sirens going off for people who have other oblasts programmed into their phone. Tomorrow I'm going to go to Chernihiv, so I'm sure that it's going to be different. I'm going to see a different side. But I have to say my impression of Kyiv has been that this is a modern city that continues to be prosperous, to engage with the world, and so I was actually surprised and pleased to see that, at least in Kyiv, the economy seems to be rolling along.
Yes, and it is a part of foreign aid in terms of humanitarian assistance to maintain their peaceful life in large cities in the rear, because it is very vital for Ukrainian economy.
It is,
obviously.
it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my next question is about your assistance to the number of organizations that are working in Ukraine. I mean, DOBRE organization and Humanitarian Assistance Project CLEAR. And also you provide assistance to a number of privately financed projects that help small and medium-sized business in Ukraine. Could you talk a bit about global communities' multi-phased approach to assistance to local communities and to private business?
Sure, absolutely, and thank you for asking that question. As our name implies, we are a global organization, but at the very core of who we are the communities we serve, the communities that we work on together with the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, the communities, the 100 communities with whom we have worked over the last 8 or 9 years. We started here in 2016, actually, so we have a deep history with Ukraine. And around the world, as you mentioned earlier, we're in more than 30 countries around the world, but at the very root of every single thing we do is the community. And so our approaches vary, in all honesty, from country to country. Because they are so community driven, we have to identify an approach that works for that community. But in general, it involves listening to communities. It involves using methodologies that bring the voices of community members to the forefront. And then it involves working with the stakeholders, including national government, but often regional and also oblast or district governments, to the table, as well as civil society, to be able to have a meaningful conversation and develop plans that will then support the development of that community and build resilience. That is the work that we do across the world. Our mission statement is that we bring together local ingenuity and global insights to save lives, advance equity, and secure strong futures. So the local and global part is the partnership that we have, for example, with the Ukrainian people and the organizations here, like the civil society organizations like the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, as well as others, in implementing DOBRE. But we also bring some insights from the work that we have done across the globe in the more than 30 countries where we work. The saving lives, advancing equity, and securing strong futures part is about our 3 lines of business, and you mentioned this in your question. We do 3 different things that are mutually beneficial, let's say, that they reinforce and leverage one another. The first is sustainable development. It is really the foundation of our work with DOBRE. It's the decentralization work that we do with you. It's supporting the government of Ukraine's commitment to decentralization by providing capacity support to municipalities, to mayors and other officials, as well as working with civil society and, of course, community members to decentralize and then be able to equip them with the financial management, the planning, strategic planning and work planning skills, the communication skills, that's your part of it, the implementation project management skills that enable municipalities to carry out their own development plans. That's an example of a sustainable development program. A humanitarian assistance program is what we're pivoting to now. Because of the Russian invasion, we now have a humanitarian crisis, and so our humanitarian team is coming in with support for shelter, for dignity kits, for multi-purpose cash assistance, for various for generator procurement, and sometimes sometimes for heavy equipment to remove rubble. These are humanitarian interventions that complement our work. So in Dobre, we have had to pivot our program from being a purely sustainable development program focused on decentralization to include and layer humanitarian interventions on top. And then we have actually a for-profit microfinance business. It's called the Vitas Group. It's an independent subsidiary of Global Communities that provides microfinance, so lending to small businesses. And so we have this expertise in economic growth, in financial inclusion, that we can bring now to our programs in Ukraine. So for example, we have 3 projects here now. We have the Dobre project, which of course is the project we do together. It's, again, related to decentralization and the building of resilience. And right now we're supporting the territorial communities' recovery plans. And then we've added the humanitarian component. We have a new humanitarian project, also funded by USAID, which is called CLEAR. And then we have another project called PEARL, which is funded by Global Communities ourselves. We saw the need for economic growth and recovery in the communities we serve. In fact, we just came from a media training that your organization is doing with mayors from across your nation. And one of the most important things they said to us is that they need economic growth in their communities. They're asking for access to finances for their businesses. So businesses that were closed, perhaps during occupation, can reopen again, but they need money, they need capital. And so we started a small project with our own funds. We put $1 million of our own money into this project, and we are providing technical assistance and then grants to businesses, small, I would say micro, small, and maybe a little bit bigger than small. We have 3 different categories of businesses, and we have criteria, and they have to make business plans and proposals, but then we provide grants to businesses to enable them to grow, to create jobs, and to fuel economic growth in their communities. So that is the way in which those 3 lines of business within Global Communities come together right here in Ukraine.
Great, thanks for this in-depth analysis. But what can we respond to those who say that state should play a bigger role in this communication and links between local societies and organizations like yours, internal grantees? So what is your experience of regarding the position of the state in this cooperation between external NGOs and humanitarian aid organizations and local communities, especially in terms of warfare in Ukraine and during this wartime?
By state, do you mean the government, the national government of Ukraine? Is that what you mean?
Yes,
by state? Yes. Yeah. I mean, of course, everything we do is in collaboration with the federal government. I mean, yesterday I was at the Ministry of Infrastructure. We also collaborate and try to we have to. We are guests of your nation, and we are invited by the government of Ukraine in within an agreement that was developed between the government of the United States and the government of Ukraine. So we try to ensure that everything we do is entirely consistent with the government. That said, there is always a call for more services, more communication, more transparency, more funding to communities than governments often provide. And we try to support government efforts, but then also work creatively together. And today I just had a conversation with some of your staff people about, and leadership, really, your leadership team, about how we need to be more creative in communicating effectively, in drawing upon the entrepreneurial resources of communities themselves and businesses. I mean, Ukrainian businesses and American businesses working together. So I think we don't want to be confined with only government work. We want to make sure that we're building in civil society and private sector, both capital but also innovation and entrepreneurial thinking, because that's how you're going to be able to jumpstart economic growth at the community level. It's not going to be just government. It never is. It has to be with private sector and with nonprofit support.
Thanks. So you was a Peace Corps volunteer, and later you became a national director of Peace Corps. So Ukraine participate in this program for many years. What is your vision how this organization, how Peace Corps may provide assistance to Ukraine, and how you evaluate this cooperation?
You know, Peace Corps is a wonderful program of the American people. It is a government agency. Most people think that it is a nonprofit organization, civil society. It is not. It is a government agency. So I actually worked for the government when I was the director of the Peace Corps. I worked under President Obama. I was selected by President Obama. Ukraine was our biggest program at the time. We had more than 500 volunteers here. And I think the fact that Ukraine was our largest program meant that our government was willing to invest the biggest amount of money in supporting a volunteer force to build relationships of trust between our two countries. I think that says a lot, actually, about the relationship of Ukraine to the American people. And we have been here since the early 90s. I'm forgetting exactly what year. And Peace Corps volunteers did a number of different things. Maybe the most important thing they did was they taught English, and they did a lot of youth development work. So they were teaching in high schools, but they were also, and maybe in colleges, but they were also starting, you know, girls and boys clubs. They were teaching soccer. The most important thing that Peace Corps does is it brings ordinary Americans to live in community with ordinary Ukrainians for a period of 2 years. And during that time, they build relationships that are lifelong, truly lifelong. And by doing so, they each learn from one another, so it is mutual benefit. It's not our country bringing something to Ukraine, but rather Ukraine and American citizens together changing each other's lives forever, for the better. And thousands and thousands and thousands of Peace Corps volunteers have served in Ukraine, and those returned Peace Corps volunteers are a powerful force back home for Ukraine. They frequently are advocates to our Congress. They call for greater funding for Ukraine in terms of the development assistance, but even military assistance, I think. They are powerful advocates in my country, for your country. And I personally think that the Peace Corps, I'm confident of this actually, Peace Corps is the most effective and powerful citizen diplomacy agency in the United States for relationships of trust at the civilian level between people, people-to-people exchange.
Sure, it's very important in terms of understanding each other, especially.
Yes.
Ukraine in United States, and it's vital for us in terms of support in such sphere as shipping ammunition and economical assistance. That's really very important in these circumstances.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about Peace Corps is probably the largest single source of development workers and diplomatic workers within the United States. So if you go to any USAID embassy and you ask how many of you are Peace Corps volunteers, a big portion will be, especially in developing countries, maybe less in Paris, but if you go to Ukraine here, I am sure there are some returned Peace Corps volunteers there. They are the people who then work on our foreign policy. But they are informed by their 2 years here in, you know, in Kharkiv or something.
Maybe we should talk about global picture of current developments in international assistance, humanitarian aid. I mean that situation when we appear, we may describe it as warfare that was declared by autocracies towards democracies. So what is your opinion? What is the place and what role may humanitarian aid organizations play in such fragile situation we are witnessing right now in Ukraine and also in Middle East, and maybe some new atrocities and warfare will erupt soon?
Yes, I mean, there are a number of very clear trends in the world that are disturbing in some ways. I mean, I think the rise in autocratic government and the rising numbers of state-sponsored and non-state-sponsored conflict is a really problematic trend. And of course, our response as humanitarians is to try to be there for the people. As humanitarians, we take a stance of neutrality. That's part of our commitment in order to safeguard our own people as well as the populations we serve. But we also insist on human rights and, proportionality and other principles of humanitarian work that guide strong responses in humanitarian crises. So the rise in authoritarian regimes is a very big problem. We have a number of other trends that I think are also leading our world, in your words, to a more fragile state, include climate change, for example. We're seeing all over the world, we're seeing the effects of climate change that are pulling back the development growth that we've seen over the past couple of years, or the past 2 decades, actually. And that this is taking form in different ways. Extreme weather, from increasing, drought to very extreme, flooding and really severe storms, to the rising sea levels, to the melting of the Arctic poles. These are all symptoms of a larger changing climate that we all have to be concerned about, because we have one planet and we all share it. It's the only planet we have. And I am deeply concerned that our global community is not able to respond effectively to the climate crisis. So in our organization, we've made climate change a principle within every single one of our projects. Over the next couple of years, we're building it in. By 2030, every one of our projects is going to have a climate lens. Inequality and inequity is another serious concern. We have also made a strong commitment towards gender equality. We want to make sure that every one of our programs has a gender lens, so that we are considering the gender implications of all of our work. It doesn't mean we only work with women. We work with men, for sure. We work with all genders. But we want to be aware of the impact of gender on any intervention that we do. Of course, poverty, rising inequity also leads to greater income disparity. So poverty is a continuing battle. In many ways, within the last 20 years, humanity has seen the largest improvements in development ever in the history of humanity. However, crisis and climate change are bringing those incredibly hard-won development gains, forcing them backward, and that is really sad to see.
Thanks so much. Previously, you mentioned that humanitarian aid organizations have to stay neutral. But in terms of conflict, both sides may put blame on such missions, that they are not objective, that they support another side. Is that a real challenge that may prevent you from dealing with current challenges and fulfilling your obligations in full scale?
Individuals and nations are not neutral, but humanitarians who are responding on the ground with a population have to be neutral, so they do not place that population at risk. When we are acting in a situation, we are concerned about the people right here, and we are doing our best to save their lives. Oftentimes, we are working on both sides of a conflict, and I will just tell you that, the one that's really difficult for us right now is the situation with Israel and Hamas, the conflict between Israel and Hamas. We have people in Israel, staff in Israel, a smaller staff, and then we have 242 staff in Palestine, 90 of whom are in Gaza. We have been in Gaza since 1994, and we have a lot of staff and a lot of supporters who are Jewish, who affiliate with Israel. And so we have people who support both sides of the conflict. In situations like this, we must keep our eyes on who we are serving at that moment and be neutral in that we are only looking at saving their lives, providing their support. Now, in the situation with Ukraine, we only work in Ukraine. We are not working in Russia. Are we neutral? We're neutral in that we are focusing our efforts on Ukraine, but we're not, our government is not neutral in this, and our funding is not neutral. So, perhaps we're not neutral, but as humanitarians, we take a pledge for neutrality because that is the quickest and safest way to ensure the safety of our staff and of the people we serve. So, I guess just to finish this, individuals who are providing humanitarian assistance have their own opinions. They always do. And it's informed by their experience and their knowledge and relationships. But as people who serve the world in the most difficult situations, we have got to be neutral to preserve safety. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So my last question is about plans of global communities regarding Ukraine. What experience you may bring for us, because you are present in many countries and you dealt before with post-war countries. So in terms of rebuilding our country after the war ends, what your experience maybe become useful for Ukraine, and what dimensions of further cooperation that may be brought to the ground after the war ends? What is your vision regarding this?
I mean, my deepest hope is that we can continue to work side by side in Ukraine for many, many years. We think that, my dearest hope is that this conflict will end soon and that we can work side by side towards your recovery. That is our commitment. We hope that the funding will enable us to do that, and we will work very hard to continue to raise the funds needed to support your people. We are skilled at both working within a humanitarian situation, but then also helping communities and nations pivot towards recovery and then eventually development and resilience. And that is what our commitment is here in Ukraine as well. We stand by the Ukrainian people. We want to be your partners for as long as we can.
Thank you so much, and I hope that your organization will stay in Ukraine for a long time and will provide assistance for Ukrainians, for Ukrainian communities, local business, and that will be really fruitful and mutually beneficial cooperation, and that obviously will provide many, not just assistance for Ukraine, but strengthen ties between our nations, and that will be a crucial element of post-war reconstruction of Ukraine and the whole region.
Absolutely. That's our desire as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.